Hello everyone, welcome to our beginner-friendly tutorial on mastering basic CSS syntax. In our previous lessons, we've understood how to use HTML and HTML tags and attributes. To proceed with the module, we're going to be learning CSS syntax. Today we'll learn how to use CSS to style and lay out your web pages. So let's get started. So, what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and it's used to style and lay out web pages. With CSS, you can change colors, fonts, spacing, and much more to make your website look attractive and user-friendly. Why use CSS? Why should we use CSS? CSS makes your website look attractive, helps create a better user experience, and allows for consistent styling across your site. Imagine making all the paragraphs on your site look the same without having to style each one individually. Let's look at the CSS syntax. Now, let's understand CSS syntax. A CSS rule has a selector and a declaration block. I'll take that again. A CSS rule has a selector and a declaration block. The selector tells what element you want to style, and the declaration block tells how you want to style it. Okay, so if you look at this example here, you'll notice that this is the declaration block. All right, this is the declaration block. Inside of these curly braces, you have defined some property and assigned values to it. Okay, so the CSS rule includes, there'll be a selector. So let's use this example. So in this case, there is an element selector is being used, which is the H3. And now you select any heading of this level, and for you to style it, you have to put your curly braces open and close here. All right, and then this is your declaration block. So whatever you write, how you want to style that element is your declaration block. I hope you understand. So let's look at CSS selectors. CSS selectors tell CSS which HTML element to style. Some common selectors are element selector, class selector, and ID selectors, all of which you're going to see in a bit. All right, but in this example right here, we have element selector. If you look at this example, you notice how the heading elements here are being styled. Inside of our declaration block, we have the color property set to a value of red. That means whatever heading is selected here, or whatever heading is selected here on your web page, the color will be displayed in red. Also, we still have another example, which is the class selector. The class selector, for you to call a particular element with its class, you would have initially assigned a class to that element. Don't worry, by the time you start coding, you will understand how you can set class to elements. Remember, in our previous lessons, we talked about attributes and how you can set the class attribute, giving it a value inside of whatever element you want it to have. That's for the element of which you're assigning that class to. So the name of that class, you can still come in your CSS and call that class by starting with a full stop and then the name of the class and then your declaration block. So in this case, we are setting the image of a hero, the hero image of a website, to have a background color of yellow. All right. So you should know that CSS selectors are made up of property and values, just like what I've explained here. So this is the property, this background color here inside the declaration block is called the property. After the colon, you have the value, and you have to remember to close with a semicolon. All right. So CSS declaration are made up of properties and value. For example, here we set the background color to yellow. So it's going to change background color to yellow. Some other common properties that you can still find are like color. So that means whatever you write here, it will be like color, font size, whatever property you set that to. Right, there are lots of properties that we have. So you can combine multiple declarations within one declaration block. It's possible to do that. Okay. So let us quickly see an overview of CSS selectors, like we mentioned before. So for CSS selectors, thanks to Actor Tools for this image, we have one, the ID selector. For the ID selector, for you to call a particular element, or for you to use this selector, you need to use your hashtag before the title, or before the name of that ID attribute that you have assigned. You can see the example here. You can see that I've used an hash, and whatever element that has this ID of text, I can now come inside of here and give it its property or values and style it accordingly as I wish to. So for the class, I said it before, you use your full stop. For the element, you can just write the element just like what we saw here. So this is an element selector because we called the element itself h1, h2, h3, right? We also have star selector. This is more same like the universal selector. So I don't want this video to get so long. So if you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section, or you can reach out to your instructor and schedule a class or a live class or an office hour with your instructor. So let's go to the next slide. So like I mentioned before, declarations are made up of property and values. You have examples. You want to set the property, which is the color. In this case, the property is the color, while the value is red. So it changes the color of the text to red, right? So I also mentioned before, we have common properties like color, font size, background color, which we've seen in previous examples. So let's look at this example here. On this our website, we've set the color of this particular text to red. So when as we have declared it in the declaration block here, because this particular text here has an ID of text, we can call that in our CSS and give whatever styling we want. All right. So even if we have more text that has this ID, we can style them at once rather than styling them individually. So what is also important for us to know is to understand how we can add CSS to HTML. So there are three ways to add CSS to HTML. You have your inline CSS, you have your internal CSS, and you have your external CSS. So for the inline CSS, inside an HTML tag, you use the style attribute. For the internal CSS, in a style block, inside the head of your HTML, inside the head section, you can create a style block and put whatever styling for your CSS that you want. For the external CSS, you will need to use an external file. You name that file stars.css or whatever you want. Just make sure you have the extension correctly, which is the .css file. So you find a way to link it to your HTML, which I will also illustrate when we start coding. All right, so let's briefly look at the inline CSS, examples of the three ways that we can style or add CSS to our HTML. So for the inline CSS, you add it directly to the HTML. As you can see in this example, we have an H1 element here. All right, we have an H1 element here, and see how we use inline CSS. So we will have to write the keyword of style or the attribute of style. You have to use the style attribute, all right, and then you equal it. We have to enclose it in your quotation marks, and then you start writing the property. In this case, we have color. This property, after the colon, you write the value. It will still do what it needs to do, or it will still be styled accordingly. Same goes for the paragraph here, and as we have illustrated. So this is how you add CSS, by using inline CSS to add CSS to your HTML. Hope you understand. So let's look at the second way that we can add CSS to HTML. We have the internal CSS. For the internal CSS is added within the head. I mentioned this earlier. So you notice how in our code here, we have our head section. You can see our head section 3 to 13, from line 3 to 13. Then from line 4 to 12, we have our style. Here we opened and here we close the style. So inside of here, we now have, a block of whatever we want to style. In this case, they've called the element body and they've called the element heading and given it whatever style that we wish to give it. So in this case, I've tried to give the background color of the body. Remember, this is the body of the web page. You can see that it's styled accordingly. Background color is light blue and styled accordingly. The H1 element is styled, color is white and styled accordingly. Text align, give it another property. So I told you there are thousands of property. The property of text align center, and you notice how the page the text on the page is centered. So I also like try to bring it out so you can see. So this is how you use the style tag inside of the head. So this is how you add CSS to HTML using the internal CSS. You will still have to do it in the same file. So that's one common thing that internal CSS and inline CSS have. So you do it in the same file inside the HTML file. But when you look at external CSS, that's when it gets interesting. So for external CSS, let's see this example. So external CSS is written in a separate .css file, and you link to your HTML document using your link tag. So you notice how I've added a link tag here, all right, inside of the head. So remember, these are important codes that you should not take away. But if you look at the href, I have set it to my styles.css because I've already created a separate file that is named or titled style.css. So all I just need to do is step out of the folder. I'll know where it is. If it's in the same folder, just type the name and it's properly linked, and the styling will be affected accordingly. Don't worry, we're going to see examples. So we would want to see example of CSS code in action, and it is time to code. So here I brought you to my VS Code, and this is an example of, can you try? Yes, this is an example of our internal CSS. You can see I've written it in the head, all right, and it is styled accordingly. So I'll try to comment this out so that we can try other ways, because since we already understand the inline and the internal CSS, I'd like us to try the external CSS. So I would need this code later on, but first let us create our file. So let me zoom this in so that you can see. So I'm going to go to my folder here, and I will create a new file, and I'm going to name it styles.css. Styles.css. Good. So inside style.css, all right, I want now all my codes, all my styling is going to be inside this page. All right, so I will try to remove what I initially had here. Okay, so that because we will not be needing it anymore. So I'll choose to comment it out. So let me just comment it out. So now it's commented out. If I go live, let me see, I should have, yeah. So you can see that all the styling is taken away. It goes back to the default. But let's now add or route this, link our CSS style sheet to our HTML. So back here in my HTML, let me add the link. Remember our example, let's look at it again. Remember our example for adding external CSS, you will need this link tag. So inside of your head, you want to add the link tag. So let's do that together. So inside of my head, let me add the link tag. So I have link. Yeah, the good thing is VS Code helps you suggest, so you don't have to write all the code from scratch. So here I have style.css, but remember that the name of my file is styles.css, so I would have to like just edit it. The reason that you don't have to step up a folder, like you don't have to do this, is because it's still in the same, it will still work because it's still in the same directory. If it was not in the same directory, you can try to step out of the folder. You can do dot forward slash, or you do your normal dot forward slash, or you do your forward slash. So depending on the level where this file is located, you choose to do that. But we don't have to do that here because they're in the same directory. So we can just, you can see it even pops up styles.css. So I have nothing here, and right here I really don't have anything styled or displayed. Now that code that I have before, I'm going to copy it and paste it here so that we can now see how we have successfully linked our external style sheet. So Control V, I will remove this tag because I don't need them, right? So remove this tag and you see how the styling applies. So that's essentially how you do your external CSS. Very easy, isn't it? Interesting. So let's head on. Now, yeah, we've done some coding. You can also, practice. You can try adding CSS to your own HTML page. You can change the background color. We've tried it together. You can try it. You can style the text in a heading, or style any element on your web page that you wish to style. Okay, so it's your time to practice. All right, just do it and have fun experimenting. Good job. Now you know the basics of CSS. Keep practicing and experimenting with different styles. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.